Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather explores the complex relationship between Don Vito Corleone, head of the Corleone crime family, and that of his youngest son Michael, the reluctant but eventual inheritor to his father's criminal empire. When Vito is shot and out of action, his family is run by his eldest, Sonny, who leads the Corleones in a war against the rest of the five families after Michael shoots the drug dealer Virgil Solozzo and police captain McCluskey. When Michael returns, his eldest brother is dead and he himself is groomed to take over his father's role. Together, Michael and Vito hatch a master plan to wipe out all of their enemies simultaneously. And though Vito does not live to see it, the Corleones settle all family business, and Michael takes the family out to Nevada to expand and legitimize the Corleone empire. The second film continues to explore Michael's efforts to legitimize the family, though his plans are complicated when, like his father before him, he is subject to an assassination attempt. But in this case, he doesn't know who the culprit was, nor knows the identity of the man within his own family who aided his enemies. Whilst Michael tries to work out who wants him dead, the movie also takes a step back in time to explore the rise of Vito Corleone from humble immigrant to small-time mob boss, directly comparing and contrasting the methods and ethics of father and son as heads of their respective families. You could argue that the central theme of the first two Godfather films is the disconnect between father and son, implied in the first film through lines of dialogues here and there, and Michael's evident reluctance to follow in his father's footsteps, and visualized in the second film, which vividly showcases the similarities and differences between Vito and Michael. Whatever you might say about Don Vito Corleone, he was always surrounded and loved by his blood family. He even dies while playing with his grandson in a fantastic scene which I've analysed in another video. Michael, on the other hand, dies alone, having ostracized the very same family he sought to protect, his wife thrown out of his home, his brother murdered by his orders, his daughter killed because of his inability to escape the life. Even if we discount the controversial third film, the image of Michael at the end of The Godfather Part II, alone in the Corleone complex, is a striking one, as is the shot of Michael sitting alone while his family sings "For He's a Jolly Good Fellow" to his father on his birthday in the famous flashback scene, perhaps the greatest scene in the entire saga. It's a throwback to a happier time, a time when Sonia was alive, before Fredo being sent to Vegas, before Connie was trapped in an abusive marriage. The family was whole and one, and it's an aura of nostalgia that even we as the viewer can relate to, as much of the cast from the first film returns with cameos. Well, most of them, as even though Don Corleone clearly enters the home and his family rushes to him off screen, Marlon Brando never appears in the film. As many already know, Brando was supposed to be in the movie, in this final scene with the rest of the actors who made cameos, but for some reason, he just never showed up to set. Whether it was because he had some beef with the studio over pay, whether he felt there was an issue with the script, or whether in typical Brando fashion he just didn't bother to turn up, Coppola was forced to improvise and filmed the flashback scene without him. For more info, you can check out a video of mine called "Why Did Marlon Brando Not Return for The Godfather Part 2? But what if he did turn up? What if Marlon Brando filmed his scene as Don Corleone? What would be different about the scene? In other words, what was the original ending of The Godfather Part 2? You might think that had Brando turned up to the set, the film would have ended pretty much the same way, only we'd see Vito and his family would surround him, and maybe Michael would continue sitting and smoking by himself in the corner without greeting his father. But interestingly, the original ending to the film is pretty different, and it seems Brando not turning up forced Francis Ford Coppola to make some major changes to the movie's ending. The original screenplay to the film is available to read, and its ending is very different to what we got. It has a very different feel and makes you ponder on the future of the Corleones in a much different way. So before we get to the final scene and what Brando would have to do in his scene, it's worth noting that the structure of the ending is different in the original script. Fredo's death occurs, and then Hyman Roth is shot in the airport. That makes for some major change to the tone of that part of the film, as the segue after Fredo's death to the family flashbacks brings up all kinds of nostalgic and melancholy emotions, which is lost by having Fredo's death occur so early. Anyway, Fredo dies, then Roth, and then we get that scene where Kay says goodbye to her children and Michael shuts the door on her. And then we get a new scene at the Tahoe estate. It's years later, and there's shots highlighting how run down the complex looks. It reminds me of the original opening of The Godfather Part 3, with all the gloomy and creepy shots of the Corleone Tahoe house. There's no button men, only Michael Corleone having a sparse meal, attended by his sister Connie, who has adopted the role of the surrogate mother-wife. Again, quite similar to what we get in the third film. Michael looks older, and it's suggested that his diabetes has taken its toll on him. The duo await the arrival of the now 18-year-old Anthony, who comes off as a bit cold and distant in the script. Michael squints up at his son, rising and embracing him, talking about how much taller he is than him. Michael begins small talk about having a meal, about Anthony graduating in a year, and the fact that he himself never got to finish college because of the war. Connie then interrupts to give Michael an insulin shot, advising Anthony to go to his room. One of the most striking elements of this scene is the stark contrast of the feeble Michael Corleone to the powerhouse he was during the rest of the film. Connie then gives a monologue almost identical to what she says to Michael in the third film. "Whenever I see that lake so cold, I think of poor Fredo, drowned. Lake Tahoe is very cold. They say if a person drowns in it, that the body will remain mid-suspended, perfectly preserved. Some say it will remain forever." She then puts her things away and leaves after telling Michael, "Your boy will be back." Michael is then left alone in the garden, and the camera moves closer to him, in what is probably the same shot as the final one in the film. Then the flashback occurs, although it isn't Don Corleone's birthday but Christmas celebrations. Much of the small talk is the same as what we've seen in the film, Sonny introducing Carlo and whatnot, but then Vito enters from his study, asking his wife how long the food will be, and then regarding his family happily, raising a glass and saying, "A good life, a long life to all my children and friends, to my grandchildren and those that will be, to our family." Tessio then proposes another toast for Vito, and we cut to the family dinner. The script goes as follows. Sonny says, "What do you think of those Japs, eh? The nerve of those Japs, coming right here in our own backyard dropping bombs." And Hagen says, "Well, we could have expected it after the embargo." "Hey, expect it or not, those Japs don't have the right to drop bombs in our backyard. Whose side are you on?" And then Mama Corleone says, "Please, do we have to talk about the war at the table?" Michael has been listening to this discussion, and then he says, "Pop, I've decided I'm going to enlist." A quiet hush descends over the table, as though everyone knows the effect this will have on the old man. Sonny tries to make light of it. "Kid, stay in college. The girls are cuter, if you know what I mean." "Pop had to pull a lot of strings to get you your deferment," says Hagen. "I never asked for it. I don't want it." View on Don Corleone, disturbed but wise and prudent. "My son wants to talk about this, and so we'll talk, but not at the dinner table." He rises and starts across the room towards his study. Then he looks back. "Michael?" He then disappears into his study. Michael rises, glances around. People are generally tense over the situation. Michael follows his father into the study. The Don closes the door behind his son and then moves across the room. He stops at the little bar there and pours himself a brandy. "Would you like some?" "No, Dad." "Now what is this talk about joining the army, eh?" "It's not talk. I'm doing it." "You would risk your life for strangers?" "Not for strangers, for my country. Anyone not in your family is a stranger. Believe me, when trouble comes, your country won't take care of you. That's how it was in the old world, Pop, but this is not Sicily." I know, Michael. Your brothers and sisters are all here. We are happy. Let's not spoil this. Go your own way, but when you are ready, come to me, the way a son should. I have hopes for you." We get a close view on Michael looking at his father with a mixture of great love and also fear and confusion. "I won't be a man like you." We then dissolve to the Tahoe estate. The leaves are blowing, music comes up. Michael and his young son Anthony walk through the grounds of the estate, talking about things we cannot hear. So a very interesting ending, I think, drastically different to what we got, where the ending to the final film was quiet, deliberate, and thought-provoking, with Michael sitting solemnly alone at the dinner table while everyone else sings for his father, and then the shot of him sitting alone decades later. It's quiet, but it's cinematic perfection. I'm not sure on this original script's ending. I'd like to have seen it in an extended cut or a deleted scene, but in many ways I think the trouble of having to rewrite the ending to accommodate Brando going AWOL ended up actually giving us a better ending. At the very least, it's symbolic for so much to revolve around the Great Don. so much of Michael's life influenced unwittingly by him, and yet to never actually see him in the film, always a room away from Michael, just out of reach. And we never needed to see Vito being told about Michael joining the Marines, even if it is interesting to speculate how it would have went down when Don Corleone was finally told. This ending pretty much explains the mood of the family in the early stages of the first film. It feels like it ties the two movies together very well, strengthening the bond between them. I always got the feeling that there was some major war of words or something that occurred between father and son before Connie's wedding scene. Clemenza's talk to Michael, when he's showing him how to use the gun, implies this, and there's even a scene in a book sequel to The Godfather which shows a verbal confrontation between Michael and Vito, which I talk about in a video called Michael Corleone's Brutal Message to His Father and Vito's Brilliant Response. I'm pretty sure the author was inspired by this scene in the script. Michael even has a similar line about not wanting to be like his father, although he's much harsher in the book. It's all very symbolic. Some may argue it's a little too on the nose, but scripts can often come off as feeling different to how things end up on screen, so who knows how it would have actually played out. Connie saying Fredo's body will remain forever, which could be taken to mean Michael's guilt and punishment will last forever, and then saying your boy will be back. There's two father-son scenes so close together, so clearly meant to be compared. Two scenes of fathers wanting to connect with their sons. Maybe this is why the Connie and Anthony scene was cut out and the final shot of Michael and Anthony, because it was supposed to mirror Vito's scene with Michael and wouldn't have the same impact without it, so they got rid of it all except for Michael sitting alone. I mean, it would have been an interesting scene for the actors, a rare one in the saga between Pacino and Brando together, and no doubt they'd be able to pull it off. If I had to pick, I'd take the ending we got in the end. It works on so many levels, and while the script ending might be more dramatic, it's too heavy-handed, and we don't need to see Michael and Vito discuss the Marines. It's clear all the way back in the first film that Vito didn't approve of what his son was doing. The absence of the Don also keeps his grandeur and larger-than-life appearance intact. Michael saying, "I won't be a man like you," is not something that ever needs to be said in any Godfather film. The point has already been made many times over, it's way too on the nose, and comes off as trying to explain the purpose of the scene, and by extension the movie itself, when it's already clear and tragic the way it is. The thing with his son at the end is interesting though. It's almost like a segue into a third Godfather film that we never got. It changes the scope of the ending in some ways, where the final film wraps things up perfectly, cementing Michael's change into what he eventually becomes. This ending implies we'll be taking a closer look at Anthony in a next potential film. Even if it isn't something that the filmmakers look to explore further, perhaps they were simply trying to show that Michael would go on to corrupt his son and bring him into the life. Or maybe advise him on the mistakes he's made in his life and tell him to be on the straight and narrow. Who knows? It's difficult to say from the script, though I guess that's the point. Again, it's an interesting set of events. Vito's line about your country not being there for you when trouble comes is interesting, seeing how Michael has to defend himself in the hearings against the government. But all things considered, the ending of The Godfather Part 2, the one we got, is perfect. And the scene from the flashback all the way to when the credits start rolling might just be the best few minutes in cinematic history. So what do you think of the film's original ending? Would you have preferred if Marlon Brando turned up and filmed his scene? Or do you think the movie is fine the way it is? Let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching.